we had the page in front of us, and I digressed a little bit to expand some of the ideas. The page we have today incorporates some of those sources, plus many others. I'm going to ask you to turn to the second side of the page, and just look at the last source. Because if we do the last source first, the shir ends early, right? Source number 9. It comes from Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. This is rare. People will ask me, what in the world are you quoting from the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch? Kitzur Shulchan Aruch was a work by Shlomo Gansfried from Hungary about 250, 300 years ago. And it's a compilation of all of what we call in Shulchan Aruch Orach Hayim, the laws of Tefillah, laws of Brachot, laws of Shabbat and Chagim, and that's it. That's basically what the book entails. We used it in elementary school once upon a time as a basic text to study dinim. The problem was that while in my early days in yeshiva education, starting from grade 5 and 8 until 12, I lived in Borough Park where there was a dominant Hungarian community there, and the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch was immensely popular. It didn't sit well with other communities because of the chumrah factor, the factor of being strict on many, many, many points of halakha. Other communities had lenient rulings and lenient ways of doing things, yet the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch did become somewhat of a main text until people graduated to doing the Chofetz Chaim's Mishnah Brura, which is a more halakhic book, which was an addendum to the Shulchan Aruch of Rabbi Yosef Karo. And he already brought into play many of the diverse opinions that you have in the world of the Achronim, the late greats from the 16th century till today. And many of those opinions were not necessarily the strictest opinion. After the Chofetz Chaim died in 1933, and in some circles, the Mishnah Brura is still the common text, the last word on the word of halakha. But in many communities, that's not so any longer. There are great, great poskim who come after the Chofetz Chaim, like Rav Moshe Feinstein in the States, Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach here in Eretz Yisrael Yerushalayim. So we have other opinions out there, and that makes life, halachic life, somewhat complicated, because what do you mean, this is the halakha? My grandfather told me such and such. And the answer is, you're both right. You know, what your grandfather heard was correct, and what you heard was also correct, and elu ve'elu 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 divrei Elokim chayim. So the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch here brings the basic Chodesh Elul month of customs, and was underlined in the middle of source number 9, what we talked about last week, Od nahagim b'mdinot elu miyom bet Rosh Chodesh Elul. If you recall last week, I talked about the minhag of saying LeDavid Hashem Ori, which is Tehillim Perek Kav Zayin, 27th chapter of Tehillim. Some people started on the second day of Rosh Chodesh, which is the popular custom. Some even began on the first day of Rosh Chodesh and explained because Elul only has 29 days, and they wanted to make it into a full 30 days so that you add the Aseret Mei Tshuva and you have 40 days. And this is what, I'm not going to repeat the whole share from last week, but the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch brings the popular custom of beginning on the second day of Rosh Chodesh Elul, which is the first of Elul, Ad Shmini Atzeret. Now this is a man living in Hungary. Here in Eretz Yisrael, we don't say LeDavid Hashem until Shmini Atzeret, but we say until Hoshana Rabbah. And the reason is because there's a Yom Tov Sheni factor kicking in. So Shmini Atzeret is also the Yom Tov Sheni of the 7th day of Sukkot. And therefore the LeDavid Hashem Ori saying spills over in Chutz La'aretz until Shmini Atzeret. But here, we quit by Hoshana Rabbah. And Shmini Atzeret, which is also Simchat Torah, we don't say LeDavid Hashem Ori here in Eretz Yisrael. The idea of additions to the Tefillah, and I mentioned that we blow shofar before the LeDavid Hashem Ori. Rav Moshe Isserlis, the Ramah, in Shulchan Aruch says there's a custom even to blow the shofar by Ma'ariv at night. I mentioned I never saw a blowing at nighttime before LeDavid Hashem Ori. But I guess he saw it, but he mentions it's not a widespread custom. The Sfaradim also have a shofar blowing, but it has nothing to do with the LeDavid Hashem Ori. They've never added the 27th chapter of Tehillim into the davenings, but they have slichas. And this we talked a little bit about the shir, that Moshe Rabbeinu goes up on Elul for the third time of a 40-day period till Yom Kippur, And this is where the Sephardi Slichot basically kick in. When they say Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Hapayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, what we call the 13 attributes, Shlosh Esrei Midot, there's somebody in the shul blowing shofar. And I can tell you from experience in my 7 years in Beersheba back in the 80s, and having to daven Slichot all of the month of Elul with my students, who 80% were Eidot HaMizrach, and therefore we had all the students join the tefillah. We didn't force the Ashkenazi students, but we encouraged them to do it, to join the 80%, and all of the staff, the teachers of Gemara and so on, all joined, and therefore we accrued some experience in the Sephardi ritual of Ben Adam Alecha Nirdam Kum Kira Bedachanunim, beautiful slichot, as we had. The Baal Tokea will sound off the shofar every time there was Shlosh Esrei Midot, Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum V'Chanun. It was a very moving combination of the shofar, which gives you the chills and the shakes, and which is exactly what it's supposed to do. It's a jolting experience. And you're saying Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum V'Chanun, which is the core of every slichot. You don't have to be Ashkenazi for this or Sephardi for this. The core of all slichot is the saying of the 13 attributes, and you need a minyan for it. So some of the poskim say that if you're saying slichot at home, for whatever reason, either you delete that, and then you just say the poetry, which most people don't understand anyway, but then it's like taking the oxygen out of, taking the air out of the balloon. You're taking the core issue of slichot is the Shem Hashem Kel Rachum V'Chanun. And but some say that you are permitted to say Hashem Hashem Kel Rachum V'Chanun as part of the slichot in private, b'yechidut, provided that you sing it with the cantillation, we call the trup, as if you're reading it in the Chumash, in the Torah. So if you're proficient about laning, so you can say Hashem Hashem Kel Rachum V'Chanun with the ta'amim, with the trup. You're allowed to do that. And but that's second fiddle. The most important part of slichot is with a minyan to say Hashem Hashem Kel Rachum V'Chanun. And I'll just say that the division of the Hashem Hashem Kel Rachum V'Chanun is not clear in the Chumash itself. We talk about 13 attributes, Shlosh Esrei Midot, but if you open up a Rav Steinsaltz Gemara, Rav Steinsaltz edition to Masechet Rosh Hashanah, Daf Yud Zayin, he's got a chart, and he divides it according to 9 different opinions. I may have mentioned this last week, to 9 different opinions of slicing the pie of Hashem Hashem Kel Rachum V'Chanun. So whatever, we don't know the division, and we say it, and hopefully HaKadosh Baruch Hu will pick up the right attribute that's applicable for whatever Avera in question. And that's why one of the poems that we say during Aseret Mechuvah has the phrase, Na kol midah nechona. We ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please choose the appropriate midah. We have no clue which is the right one to synchronize the Avera chart with the Shlosh Esrei Midot, nor do we have a clue how to slice the pie. If there are 9 different opinions, that means there are different ways to slice the pie. And one opinion, we do it according to the Tosfot. Hashem, Kel, Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Hapayim, Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzah Chesed, L'Alafim, Nosei Avon V'Fesha, V'Chata'a V'Nakeh, and we stop. Now, V'Nakeh is V'Nakeh Lo Yenakeh, if you know the Pasuk. You're actually in the middle of a phrase. And there are some who count Lo Yenakeh as another one. They all end up at 13. And one splits the pie that you end up with V'Salachta Lavonenu U'Chatatenu U'Nchatanu, which is like the way end of the Pasuk. And people wonder, when we say Slichot, or Tachnun Monday, Thursday, and some who daven Nusach Sfard say it every morning for Tachnun, when we say Hashem, Hashem, Kel Rachum V'Chanun, so we end with V'Salachta Lavonenu U'Chatatenu. It's in the Siddur. Why do we do that? The answer is, it's V'Chata'a V'Nakeh, ... etc., 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 until V'Salachta Lavonenu. Just in case we don't have it all correctly said, so we symbolically bring it to the end of the Pasuk as well, and maybe it incorporates that entire Pasuk. The question is the first Hashem count? Does the second Hashem count? Does Kel count? Rachum v'chanun, is it one or is it two? Erech apayim, Rav Chesed ve'emet, is Rav Chesed separate, emet is separate, or is it together? They're all different combinations. All of the above are true, depending on which view one points out to. Now, if you look at on the top of this page, the second side, number 4, it's the Rambam in the Laws of Tshuva. This is a key sentence or paragraph in the Rambam's Laws of Tshuva, where he talks about the fact that a person should view himself or herself, as we enter the Yamim Noraim season, as having 50% merit and 50% demerit. Again, we don't know what's going on in our private charts. How many mitzvot, how many avirot do we have? We don't know. And even if we had a numerical count, we're not even familiar with the weight of particular avirot. And yes, avirot and mitzvot come with weights. Some are heavier. I once gave a shir called the heavy-duty mitzvot, and I simply focused on the 7 or 8 mitzvot that Chazal said they are shkula keneged kol HaTorah. They're equivalent to all the mitzvot. And the Rambam tells us that if the Chazal said such a phrase that a particular mitzvah is equal or equivalent to all of the mitzvot, you know it's a heavy-duty mitzvah. One of them is living in Eretz Yisrael. I've said that often in Teaneck. The living in Eretz Yisrael is one of the heavy-duty mitzvot. Shabbat is one of them. Tzedakah is one of them. Brit Milah is one of them. Not serving avodah zarah is one of them. Not serving, not worshiping. Right, right. The negative side. Not worshiping avodah zarah is one of the shekula keneged kol mitzvot, and so on. It's a list. It's a very important list of mitzvot that are shkula keneged kol mitzvot. So we're not familiar with the weight, because there is a concept called mitzvah kala and mitzvah chamura. In Pirkei Avot, the 2nd chapter, it says Hevei zahir b'mitzvah kala keva chamura. Be careful with the easier mitzvot or the light-weighted mitzvot, as you most probably are for the more serious mitzvot. And then the Rambam in his commentary to this Mishnah tries to give us an explanation or a categories. Which are the chamurot, which are the kalot, which are the more serious, which are the light-weighted. And he says, well, if it's the negative mitzvot, this is going to be easy because there is a punishment chart. So there are capital punishment, and they come in 4 flavors. And there's an order to the capital punishment, skila, sreifa, herek, and chenek, that we're familiar with from the Machzor on Yom Kippur, after we say, Al chet shechatanu l'fanecha, Al chet shechatanu l'fanecha, Al chet shechatanu l'fanecha, and then V'al chata'im shanu chayavim aleihem, V'al chata'im shanu chayav aleihem, and on the sins that we're obligated to get this, and the sins they're obligated that. And the last one says the 4 versions of Arba Mitot Beit Din. And we enumerate skila, which is stoning, which Chazal say, even though we don't have a Beit Din, HaKadosh Baruch Hu can bring it about, Shalom Neda, we should know from Tzarot, in an airplane crash. That's also skila, because what they did with a person was they threw him off the mountain, and most likely he died from that fall before they even threw a pebble at him. So that kind of death is called skila. Sreifa is burning. People unfortunately get burnt. Chenek is asphyxiation. Sometimes people choke to death. And heref is decapitation. Sometimes their bodies are blown up, and it's also a type of hereg. So in different modes, these 4 types of mitot beit din, modes of execution, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to mete it out on somebody today, he has his ways of doing it, not in the formal way that it was practiced once upon a time in a beit din. And we should be aware of the fact that even though your experience in reading Chumash will tell you, mot tamut, you shall die several times over in the Chumash, the Mishnah tells us that if a Beit Din executed once in 70 years, it was a bloody Beit Din, which means they tried their utmost not to bring somebody to execution. That does not mean that they let him off the hook. The Beit Din had opportunities of jail, sentencing, and this is not in the Chumash. There's a general authority by Beit Din to protect society. And if there's a need to put somebody away for a prolonged time because that person is dangerous to society, they can do that. So just because they didn't execute doesn't mean the person walks away and waves to the judges and say, ha ha ha, I'm a free bird. He's not necessarily a free bird, so we don't have to worry about that. And we also deeply believe that Kadosh Baruch Hu's upper court, heavenly court, can take care of the situation just as well. But there is a halakha that really tells us that the purpose that the Torah says, this is motamut, 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 is to teach us the severity of the Aveira. The person has to know that he or she did something that's a capital punishment offense, even today when there's no judicial authority for execution on this level of a halachic beit din of 23 judges and so on. So the Rambam tells us that the order of skila, sreifa, hereg, and chenek is not haphazard, but it's the order of severity. If somebody does an avera that there's skila, it's the highest order of a sin. And the next is the sreifa, and the next is hereg, and the next is chenek. And why do I say this? Because the Mishnah tells us that there's a dispute as to what the order is. There's a view by the Tanam, Rabbi Shimon, who says that if skila, sreifa, hereg, and chenek is 1, 2, 3, and 4, Rabbi Shimon believes it's 2, 1, 4, and 3. It's sreifa, skila, chenek, and hereg. So you may say, what's the difference? Execution is execution. The answer is that it teaches us the severity of an avera. And it is important when a person does tshuva to understand the weight factor of the avera. And those are the first 4. Number 5 is karet. Karet means beit din does nothing to you, but a Kadosh Baruch Hu will be some type of loss of olam haba. Loss of olam haba, that's not something person is interested. And averas like eating on Yom Kippur, eating chametz on Pesach, not doing a brit milah, these are big time performances that carry with them the penalty of karet. That's one of them. And then the next one is called mita b'idei shamayim. It's God's mode of execution, just dealing with a person, a death blow, however he chooses to do so. And then that was 6. And the 7th is malkot, lashings. Again, we don't do that today in a beit din at all, but if a person ate cooked beaten milk together, and all this has to be, of course, with witnesses, has to be forewarning beforehand, and the person says, I don't care, and they bring him to court, and they try him, and they accuse him, and they convict him, so he would get the 39 lashes, malkot. And the 8th category is a lav she'ein bo ma'aseh, an avera that there's no physical act to it, but it's just a sensation that's also an avera. For example, you remember in the 10 Commandments, and so some people remember the great movie in 1956, Charlton Heston, right? They said the book was much better. The 10th commandment. So what is the 10th commandment? So if you look at some shuls, I don't know what you have here. Yeah, you have it here. It says lo tachmod. Lo tachmod. The English word in the King James edition was not to covet. I never knew what coveting means. We didn't use that in Borough Park. Covet, right? So I didn't know what that means. But it's a strong desire for. A strong desire for. It says, it enumerates, just in case you don't have your own imagination. It could be for somebody's wife, it could be somebody's property, for somebody's animal, somebody's this, somebody's that. Masada, shocha, charmocha. In those days it was in somebody's ox and somebody's donkeys and so on. Today it's the guy's car and the guy's villa and his swimming pool. Chaval that he has it and I don't have it, that's an avera. But if you remember from Parshat Vet Chanan, where the Aseret Dibrot splits the 10th commandment into 2. It's lo tachmod, but before lo tachmod, it's lo titaveh. Now the word chet mem dalet, to have tachmod or chomed, which is desirous, lust. So ta'ava is also lust. They seem to be synonymous. Lo titaveh and lo tachmod seem to be synonymous phrases. So the Rambam tells us the difference is, lo titaveh is you walk by a guy's beautiful car, and you say, wow, chaval, he has it and I don't have it. That's already an avera. What did you do? Nothing. You continued walking and just went on with your life. The very jealous sensation that he has it and I don't have it is an avera. Now, beit din cannot punish because beit din doesn't know what you thought about. Kadosh Baruch Hu knows, right? It says, Hanistarot l'Hashem Elokeinu v'aniklot lanu v'neinu, Parshat Nitzavim. God knows what's hidden. Bochein klayot valev. Kadosh Baruch Hu knows what's going on in the inside. But Beit Din cannot convict, because you can't try somebody. You can't say somebody, I think when the guy passed my beautiful car, he must have had a pang of jealousy. Let's convict him on it. You don't have a case, because nobody's going to be able to prove that. So that's lo titaveh. But lo tachmod, says the Rambam, is that this guy's car, I really want that car. So I go over to the owner of the car, and I say, you're selling the car? He says, no. He says, no, sell me the car. I really want your car. No. But, sometimes a person is such a nudnik, and he tells the guy, listen, here's money, down, round. All right, take the car. And he takes the money. So begrudgingly, he sells him the car. So you're not a thief. You paid for the car, but this whole show indicates how strongly you wanted that car. That's lo tachmod. And if you take it without paying, then you're a gazlan. Then it's lo tigzol. Fine, that's another avera. But Rambam says if you violate lo tigzol, you get bonus. You get 3 averas. You get lo titaveh in the pocket, you get lo tachmod in the pocket, and lo tigzol in the pocket. Because before you stole it, you must have wanted it. And you may have done something to get it legitimately, and therefore you get all these averas in the pocket. So lo titaveh is no malkot, because it's called a lav, which means a lo ta'aseh, a negative commandment. She'ein bo ma'aseh. There's no act to it. It's just a sensation. And therefore that's the lowest order of an avera. So the Rambam gives us some type of a chart of the severe to the more lenient type of mitzvot. Fine. So we don't know what's going on. And therefore, as we approach Yom Noraim, we should think that most probably we're on to use the United States football game, the 50-yard line, the 50-50 line. You're on the 50-50 line. Half mitzvah, half avera. Why? Because if you think that, this year was a pretty good year. I did a lot of chesed. I davened properly. I kept Shabbat. Never stumbled on kashrut. I mean, think about it. Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have much on me this Yom Kippur. So I don't have to take this Yom Kippur seriously. I'm really in good shape. Or a person says, see, it was a horrible year. I messed up with half the mitzvahs and more. And I was a lousy guy. And you know what? Nothing's going to help. It's a lost cause. Rambam says, don't take either stand. Think, even though this is a very, very theoretical possibility, that you are 50%, let alone each of us are 50%, let alone the whole country is 50%, but it's a healthy approach to Yomim Noraim, that we should think ourselves as 50%, that one more mitzvah can tip the scale. One more mitzvah. And therefore, according to Rambam, the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah program is a program of upgrading mitzvah performance. For the objective is to tip the scale. Let's see it inside on source number 4, on top of the second page side. Lefikach, therefore, tzarich adam sheyireh atzmo kol hashana kulo. He should see himself as ki'ilu chetzio zakai chetzio chayav. He's half merit and half demerit. V'chol chen kol olam. The whole world is chetzio zakai chetzio chayav. Chata chet echad. If you violate one avera, harei hechriyet atzmo, you have now tipped the scale for yourself. Vet kol olam kulo lekaf kova, and you brought the whole world down, because your one avera now is being counted universally for the whole world. V'garam lo hashchata, and you've caused the destruction of the world. But asa mitzvah achat, if you do one mitzvah, harei hechriyat atzmo, you have decided in your favor, and the kol olam kulo lekaf zchut, v'garam lo v'lahem tshu'a v'atzala. You have caused that you and all of the mankind will receive some type of help and delivery and so on. And therefore, if you just jump to the underline, umibnei inyan zeh, because of this, nahagu kol beit Yisrael, all of Am Yisrael have the custom, laharbot b'tzedakah u'masim tovim, to add tzedakah giving and other good deeds, v'lasok b'mitzvot, that perform mitzvot that normally you do not perform. When? Merosh Hashanah v'ad Yom Kippurim, yeter mikol Hashanah. From the 10 days of Tshuva, from Aseret Yemei, from Rosh Hashanah until Yom Kippur. We called it Aseret Yemei Tshuva. So this is a program of being consciously upgrading one's mitzvah performance. And he says, V'nagu kulam lakum balayla. Kulam, everybody. I wonder if he had women involved too. But I remember Besheva, to the Sephardi Slichot, there were women who came to Slichot. Mostly women who didn't have little children at home. But women did come to Slichot. And in the Sephardi Slichot, that's 5 in the morning. Sometimes 4:30 in the morning. And the Slichot is for an hour and a quarter before davening. Not like Ashkenazim who say Slichas in the Shtiplach at the 9:30 in the morning minyan, and they're going to get away with piyutim that talk about Ba'od Laila. Exactly what do you mean, Ba'od Laila at 9:30 in the morning? So he says, V'noagu lakum ba'leil basara yemim elu ulitpalel bebate knisiyot bedevrei tachnunim ubekivushim ad she'or hayom. This is what we call slichot until the break of dawn. So the optimum time for slichot is before the break of dawn. However it takes. If it takes an hour, it's an hour, and whatever. So the Rambam has slichot only for Aseret Mei Tshuva. He did not know of the slichot of 40 days. It came in a different direction and was adopted by Rabbi Yosef Karo of the Shulchan Aruch in representing Sephardi tradition. Except the Rambam in Egypt, 12th century, doesn't know about it, of the slichot of 40 days. And Ashkenazim actually adopted the Rambam's point of view, except there was a qualification. Because in the 13th century, in the period of the Hasidei Ashkenaz, there were groups of very pious people. They used to also fast every day of the Aseret Mei Tshuva. Of course, eating at nighttime, but still not eating during the daytime. But if you look at the map, you'll see that 4 of the 10 days you're not allowed to fast. 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, Shabbat Shuvah, and Erev Yom Kippur. And therefore, they simply moved that whole thing back 4 days. And that's why Ashkenazi Slichas is at least 4 days before Rosh Hashanah. Why I say at least? Because from a completely different angle came in another custom to begin Slichot on Motzei Shabbat. Now this year works out perfectly because Rosh Hashanah is on Thursday, and therefore your 4 days are Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, which according to the Kabbalist, the ideal time for Slichot is midnight. At midnight, with summertime, is about 20 to 1 in the morning. Now I remember going to hear the great Chazan Moshe Kosovitsky for Slichot back in 1962, 63, 64, before Kosovitsky died in 66, at 1 in the morning in Bethel. And we were there until 4 in the morning. Slichot of 3 hours. And that was in front of 1,700 people in a SRO, standing room only capacity crowd of Slichot. Right. What was that?
And then you daven Shacharis?
Right. Well, no, then we went home. And of course they went to the 11:30 minyan in the morning for Shacharis, right? But it was Sunday, which a friend of mine's called Sunday in Chutz La'aretz is Shabbat Sheni Shel Goliot. So most people didn't work on Sunday. They were able to do it. But if Rosh Hashanah doesn't come out on Thursday, so we'll still begin Slichot Motzei Shabbat and then have a few extra days of Slichot. But this year it works out with the minimum 4. And the poem was composed for that occasion, B'motzei Menucha Kidamnucha Tchila. And on Motzei Shabbat, we now approach you, opening up the season of Slichot, saying, Lishmoa El Harina Vela Tfilah. That's lifted out of Shlomo Melech's Tfilah at the opening of Beit HaMikdash, found in Melachim Aleph Perek Chet. Lishmoa El Harina Vela Tfilah, the big shul on King George Street. So the choir is going to go to town with that. Lishmoya, Lishmoya El Harina. Right? My wife always says, how come people always, the standing part of davenings are always when the Aron Kodesh is opened. So that makes you stand longer, Beseda, but when they open the Aron Kodesh, so it gives a little bit extra, we take it more seriously. Beseda. By the way, yeah?
Is it obligatory to stand?
I'm just going to quote you. Beat me to the punch. Perfect. Exactly what I was going to say now. The idea of standing when the Aron Kodesh is opened is a custom but not obligatory. Because one must necessarily stand when a Sefer Torah is being carried, is in motion. But when a Sefer Torah is in position, whether on the table for reading or in the Aron Kodesh, even if the curtain is opened, there is no obligation to stand. And I've mentioned this in my shul often enough before Nila, where the custom is to have the Aron Kodesh open for the entire Nila. Anybody that's weak, just sit down, and it's okay. It's okay to sit down when the Aron Kodesh is open. You're just not allowed to sit down when the Sefer Torah is moving. You know when that's a problem? On Simchat Torah during Hakafot. And a lot of people sit around because, Hakafot are dragging out. I don't know what's going to be this year, Simchat Torah. It's going to be a different Simchat Torah for sure. But Simchat Torah, where people are dancing and dancing, holding Sefer Torah, and many people are not part of the Hakafot, sit on the side. That's not right. And it's interesting that our Rabbi Rav Soloveitchik, he had a little different custom for Simchat Hakafot. He had all the Sefer Torah put on the table, and the dancing was around the Sefer Torah that were on the table. And therefore, whoever wanted to sit could sit, because you're allowed to sit when the Sefer Torah is lying on the table, like during laning, during reading of the Torah. So that's what he did. But nevertheless, this idea of upgrading in mitzvot during Aseret Mitzvah generated another type of custom that was against the custom. There is a custom. We know there's an idea once a month called Kiddush Levana. Kiddush Levana, which usually we practice it on Motzei Shabbat, leaving shul, after Rosh Chodesh. When after Rosh Chodesh? Usually not before the 3rd of the month, and according to the Kabbalists, not before the 7th of the month, but certainly not after the 15th of the month. It has to be when the moon is still a new moon. And a new moon, the 3rd of the month, it's still a very small moon. 7th, it's already a quarter of a moon, but you can somehow finagle and call it a new moon, and so on. Why the 3rd? Why the 7th? The idea was, if you weren't sure for Rosh Chodesh, you better make sure that it's the new moon, and you're not catching the tail end of the old moon, which is also a small moon. Now, of course, today that wouldn't happen, because today we have calendars. And today, on Shabbat before Rosh Chodesh, the Chazan is announcing when Rosh Chodesh is. He's even telling you the Moiled. He's telling you what fraction of a second you might theoretically be able to catch the first sliver of a moon. So that's not a problem. Rambam, in his halachot, tells us that you say Kiddush Levana immediately after Rosh Chodesh. He didn't go for this 3-day, he didn't go for this 7-day, but that's not the custom. The custom is at least to wait after 3 days. Okay, besada. Now, there's also a custom that after Tisha B'Av, that in the month of Av, not to say Kiddush Levana until after Tisha B'Av. Now, after Tisha B'Av is the 10th of Av already, and sometimes even the 11th, if Tisha B'Av is Shabbat, and you fasted on the 10th, so then the night after is already the 11th of the month. That's pretty late to say Kiddush Levana. And the rationale is that you want to say Kiddush Levana b'simcha, and you can't do that in the 9 days. Can't be b'simcha because the halacha says you have to be in mourning and so on. What about Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur, it's to wait for after Yom Kippur to say the Kiddush Levana for Tishrei. I mean, Rosh Hashanah is also Rosh Chodesh, Tishrei, but not to say it earlier than after Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur generates an explosion of simcha. There's a Mishnah at the end of Masechet Ta'anit. What's interesting, the Mishnah, the whole Masechet talks about bad times and fasting for drought and fasting for other terrible occasions, but it ends on a good note, almost similar to every Haftarah, where you can bring out the worst of Klal Yisrael in a Haftarah, but the last few psukim, turn it all around, and with some type of a hope and promise that it's going to be good at the end of days. So the Mishnah also ends with an up note. Amar Rav Shimon Gamliel, Lo hayu yamim tovim liYisrael kimo Yom HaKippurim v'chamisha asar be'av. The 2 greatest Yamim Tovim in the calendar are Yom Kippur and the 15th of Av. Really? The 15th of Av? Some people will say, who ever heard of? What happened on the 15th of Av? So I got news for you. The Gemara also asked that question. What in the world happened on the 15th of Av? And the Gemara gives us no fewer than 6 different things that happened on the 15th of Av. And I remember Rabbi Soloveitchik, the Rabbi, once said, too many answers means that nobody knows the answer. If there are too many answers, so what's the answer? We don't know. Which is the real answer? Which are the secondary answers? We don't know. But whatever it is, a tradition that the 15th of Av is a joyous day. What happened Yom Kippur? The Gemara says, Yom Kippur? I don't have to scratch my head on Yom Kippur. It's the date that Moshe Rabbeinu receives the second Luchot and comes down from Har Sinai. It's obviously the day of Slicha and Mechila, of atonement. What could be a greater day of Simcha than that? So Yom Kippur is indeed a great day of Simcha. So at the end of Yom Kippur, where there is a dispute amongst the great Rishonim, how does Kaparat Yom Kippur function? The special, unique atonement for Yom Kippur, which is not the usual atonement during the year. Yes, there's atonement during the year too. Chanun hamarbeh lisloach. We say 3 times a day. Slach lanu avinu kechatanu, mechal lanu makenu kifashanu. We say it 3 times a day. Baruch Ata Hashem, Chanun hamarbeh lisloach. Fine. And there's tshuva the whole year. What's the difference between the whole year and Yom Kippur? The whole year, you can deal with your Averis piecemeal, like a shopping list. All right, I'll take care of 2 Averis today and call me next week. I'll deal with the next 2, and so on. Yom Kippur, you can't say, I'll deal with 10 Averis this year and I'll be back next Yom Kippur. That doesn't work. Yom Kippur is all or nothing. All or nothing. And I mentioned last week, that's why Rabbi Akiva used the imagery of the mikveh. Ma mikveh metaheret atmeim, af HaKadosh Baruch Hu metaheret Yisrael. There is no partial tvilah, there's no partial tahara. It's all or nothing. כי ביום הזה יכפר עליכם, לטהר אתכם, מכל חטאותיכם, לפני השם תטהרו. On Yom Kippur, it's a clean slate. You walk away with a clean slate. And the question that the Chachamim had was, does this clean slate kick in in a 24-hour period? Does it begin with Kol Nidre and end with Nila? Or is it at Nila, the last seconds of Yom Kippur? It's very much at the end. And every rabbi who gives a priest Nila talk will harp on this and might even use sports illustrations to talk about a game that in the overtime, at the last split second, the whole thing switched. How much you can switch your whole life in a split second. And that's the Nila experience. And in that type of ecstasy and joy, you go out of shul after Ma'ariv and you say Kiddush Levana. So there is such a minhag like that. The Vilna Gaon challenged the minhag. Vilna Gaon died in 1798. He challenged the minhag and he says, why should I wait till after Yom Kippur for Kiddush Levana? My gosh, the Rambam says here, you should upgrade your mitzvah list between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, because you might be on the 50-50 line, 50% mitzvah, 50% aveira. Maybe Kiddush Levana is going to tip the scale for you. Why waste the opportunity and say it after Yom Kippur? So the Vilna Gaon challenges this very, very general custom. And here in Yerushalayim, because of the neighborhood that we live right next door here, Shari Chesed, which is the bastion of the Prussian. Who are the Prussian? The students of the Vilna Gaon who came to Yerushalayim by the encouragement of the Vilna Gaon. And you should know the Vilna Gaon made an attempt to come as well, an unsuccessful attempt, but he did make an attempt to come. But he succeeded in sending some of his top students here to Yerushalayim. And what happened was, there was a vacuum of Ashkenazi custom. Because who was in Eretz Yisrael 400 years ago, 300 years ago, 250 years ago? Sephardim. Those who came from the expulsion, right, in Tzfat, Rabbi Yosef Karo, and so on. And they came to the big 3 cities called Arei Yachatz, Yerushalayim, Tzfat, and Hebron. Yeah, Hebron and Tzfat, Yudchet Tzadik, Arei Yachatz. So this was all Sephardi territory. There were a handful of Yemenites who actually migrated, but not a lot. But it was Sephardi. That's what it was. That's why Rabbi Bat Yosef claimed all along that every Ashkenazi Oleh Chadash automatically becomes a Sephardi, because Rabbi Yosef Karo was the Mara Da'atra. He was the Rav of the place. And that was the minhag. So if you have, let's say, 1,000 Jews in a place, and one person now migrates to this place with an opposite minhag, and he's a permanent resident, he now becomes part of that 1,000. That's the halacha. You move in, you move into the minhag. So he said every arriving Ashkenazi moved into a Sephardi atmosphere, halachic atmosphere, and became Sephardi. So therefore, everybody should be a Sephardi. You want to know something? I would sign on the dotted line to that view so that all of OUisrael should be Torah achat, one Torah, and not 2 or 1,000 different Torahot. Yeah.
Isn't it like Batel B'Shishim? There was Faradim when Ashkenazi came.
All right, so Batel B'Shishim I use sometimes in different contexts, but right, no, sometimes in funny contexts. You're saying Batel B'Shishim. Here, the halacha is, it's a clear halacha that somebody moving into an area where there's a dominant communal minhag. So you automatically assume that minhag. Now, today you have to be careful with this, because after the Shoah, there was a complete breakdown of kihilot. The Rav son, Rav Professor Chaim Soloveitchik, wrote about this in Tradition 1992, Rupture and Reconstruction, and there was a breakdown. So there's no such thing as an American minhag, or Canadian minhag, or for that matter, Eretz Yisrael minhag, how much to wait between milk and meat and milk. There's no minhag. But once upon a time, there were minhagim. So there was, in Europe, there were minhagim. There was the Eastern European minhag, there was the German minhag, there was the Holland minhag, there was this minhag, there were minhagim. And what happened after the Shoah, everybody took in the suitcase their family minhag, and that's what they do. So it's not something that you can make into a kehillah. There are certain places that are kehillot. In the Breuers community, they have the Frankfurt community minhag, that's still the minhag. And if you move into that neighborhood and you become part of the community, and you never waited 3 hours after meat, you can start waiting 3 hours after meat, even though your grandfather was a Galiciana. I'm not sure they're going to let you into the community if your grandfather was Galiciana. It's a different story. But that's the way it works. And Rav Adler claimed that every Ashkenazi basically became a Sephardi. And then he says, but if you want to keep Ashkenaz minhag, yesh al mi l'smok. You have upon whom to rely on. Wow. So he allows Ashkenazim to maintain Ashkenazi minhag. I remember 1984 when the first major wave of Ethiopian Jews came to Eretz Yisrael. It was called Operation Moshe. So then Rav Mordechai Eliyahu and Rav Avram Shapiro were the chief rabbis, and there was an issue of which chief rabbi is going to be assigned to deal with the Ethiopian Jewish community, because there are two Rabbanim, right? There's the Ashkenazi and the Sephardi. So Rav Avadya says, I don't know who they are, the Ethiopians, but they're certainly not Ashkenazim. That was what Rav Avadya said. He had these interesting remarks. But he really believed that everybody is a Sephardi here. That was his view. I'll get back to Rav Avadya in a moment. But and he was a great person. But, I'm not going to get into his politics. That's my humble opinion, a little bit of a black dot on his record. But as Torah, he was a sensational posek, without a doubt. But he believed in his community very, very strongly. So the Vilna Gaon's custom was to say Kiddush Levana before Yom Kippur, and that became the minhag right here in the neighborhood in Shari Chesed, and that then spread to many neighborhoods of Yerushalayim. A lot of the minhag hagra, the minhag of the Vilna Gaon, became the minhag in Yerushalayim for many, many, many different things. Okay, so that was it. I'm just going to tell you a little tidbit of a personal note why I personally say Kiddush Levana, like the Rambam's view, the first opportunity after Rosh Chodesh. I think I'm sometimes the first one in the world saying Kiddush Levana. I have a very good feeling. But it has to do with an episode, a medical episode that I had several years ago with a slipped disc. And I could hardly walk, and I had to go from Har Tzofim to Rav Katamon by cab, which I did. And I got out, I told the cab to drop me off at the pharmacy, which is about a block and a half away from my house, which normally takes me, at my walking speed, about 45 seconds to make that walk. And I needed a fulfilled prescription for steroids to get me out of a cycle of pain that was unbelievable. And thank God they had the prescription. And then it took me 45 minutes to walk home. 45 minutes, every step. It was like really treacherous. And I turned the corner and I saw the moon, and I realized I didn't do Kiddush Levana yet that month. And I took out my phone, and I did Kiddush Levana right then and there. And I had this feeling of hitchatshut, renewal. Because what is Rosh Chodesh? And what is the bracha of Kiddush HaChodesh, if not for the sensation of renewal for Klal Yisrael? Shalot tehei pigima, there shouldn't be any imperfection. It's historic imperfection of Am Yisrael. And I took upon myself, I said, you know what? And I felt better. After I said that Kiddush Levana, I was able to walk home. Not well, with pain, but I was able to walk. And I realized it did something before I even took the steroids. It was an unbelievable remedy for me at that moment. And I took upon myself as a personal thing, I'm going to say Kiddush Levana at my earliest opportunity. And I also have a thing, I'm here in this country 45 years. And I never said Kiddush Levana in Chutz La'aretz. Because, if you're in Chutz La'aretz for a visit, so maybe after Rosh Chodesh, there is a moon there, I'll wait till I get back to Yerushalayim. Because Rosh Chodesh is something that has to do with Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. So I will do my utmost, and it's been working out so far pretty well. Even 2.5 years ago when I was in Boston, I came back a few times. I made sure I synchronized these visits with Kiddush Levana. Okay, so I have a Kiddush Levana juke in my head, which I'm very happy about. So I'm just telling you that you can do these things. Fine. The next order of business that I want to just point out is source number 7. Source number 7, yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, I was once read or heard or was told or saw that the Rambam holds the mitzvah kala is learning Hebrew.
That is correct. What the comment was, Jay Shapiro says he remembers hearing, seeing, walking, dancing. Somebody said something that the Rambam counts learning Hebrew as an easy mitzvah, a mitzvah kala. So the answer is he's right. And it's in the same Rambam that I quoted in his commentary to the Pirkei Avot, chapter 2, on Havei Zayir b'mitzvah kala kavachamura. So I talked about the heavy-duty mitzvot, and he gives us the schedule of the punishments. But then he gets to the positive mitzvot, and he's got a little bit of a tricky issue there because the Torah doesn't tell us the rewards for mitzvot. So he gives us some guidelines. But then he gives us a few examples of easy mitzvot, and one is, he says, Simchat Yom Tov, having Simcha on Yom Tov, and learning Hebrew, Lilmod Lashon Kodesh. Now, go try that at the Ulpan for people who are breaking their teeth to learning Hebrew. But the Rambam didn't mean how much effort you have to put in to do the mitzvah. He was talking about the weight of the mitzvah. Learning Hebrew. Where does it say in the Chumash you have to learn Hebrew? It's implied by the fact that the Torah is written in Hebrew. So it's true, you can study Torah in the vernacular, but it's a preferred option to study Torah in Hebrew. The Svarim are written in Hebrew. And while the Torah can be explained in 70 ways, Shivim Panim the Torah, that's you have all these different commentaries. Once you translate a verse, you are limiting yourself to one way of understanding the Torah. So it's a correct way, but 69 other ways are going to be missed by studying it just in translation. If just reading a text in English or French or Chinese or whatever, you're going to miss the points of the way Chazal understood the nuances that are there embedded in the Hebrew. So, and there are some mitzvot can only be performed in Hebrew, like Birkat Kohanim. We call in Yiddish Duchening. The bracha of the Kohanim can only be in Hebrew. So if a Kohen doesn't know Hebrew and doesn't know how to say the words Yivrechecha, he can't duchen. He has to be in Hebrew. There are other mitzvot. There's a Mishnah in the 7th chapter of Masechet Sotah. Elu ne'emarin b'chol lashon. The following can be done in all languages. Ve'elu ne'emarin b'lashon kodesh. And the following can only be done in Hebrew. So those mitzvot can only be done in Hebrew. Obviously, you have to learn Hebrew. So it's called hechsher mitzvah. It's in preparation of a mitzvah. The study of Hebrew is not a bona fide mitzvah, but it's in preparation of a mitzvah. So that's called low level of mitzvah performance. Fine, correct? Yafeh? Source number 7 is Shelot Utshuvot Yechaveh Da'at. Yeah.
The mitzvot say that have Manya Yichum Yemecha.
Right.
Are they considered?
So what the Rambam there says is if the Chazal said that it's equally weighted to all of the mitzvahs, Shkula Keneged Kol HaTorah, so then it's clearly from the Chamurot. And one of the examples is tzitzis. There's a Gemara Masechet Menachot Mem Gimel. It says mitzvah tzitzit shkula keneged kol mitzvot sheneemar uschartem et kol mitzvot Hashem. So I mean, how difficult is it to wear tzitzis? It takes no energy whatsoever. It's an inexpensive mitzvah. If you want to get a free pair of tzitzis, just go to those places that are winding tzitzis now for the chayalim and tell them you're a chayal, and you'll get one for free. And So it's an easy mitzvah. It doesn't cost a lot of money. And you just put it on, and then the rest is history. You take it overnight, and that's it. And that's one of the heavy-duty mitzvot, because the Torah says, "U'zchartem et kol mitzvot Hashem." So if you would say that the Torah says, "Leman yeruchun yamecha," a mitzvah that the Torah grants you long life, that sounds like heavy-duty mitzvah, like kibbud av v'em. Correct. So that's what the Rambam does. He tries to figure out implied signs that there are mitzvot. Let's look at source number 7. Source number 7 is Yechaveh Da'at. Yechaveh Da'at is Rabbi Avad Yosef. And he brings the custom, he writes it's a custom in Yerushalayim, but I know it's a custom even outside Yerushalayim. B'dvar minhag shenoagim b'Yerushalayim levaker b'vatei hakfarot be'erev Rosh Chodesh Nisan and erev Rosh Chodesh Elul, twice a year, to go up to the cemetery for family grave visitation before Nisan and before Elul. Okay, I'm not going to talk about Nisan now, but Elul is understandable. And then the question is, what is really behind this? So look at 7. B'dvar haminhag shenogim b'shalayim levaker beit kvarot be'erev Rosh Chodesh Nisan ve'erev Rosh Chodesh Elul al kivrei horeihem, by the graves of the parents. Yesh omrim, there are some who say Kaddish b'samuch l'kvarim, next to the grave, Aval pi she'ein sham minyan, even though there's no minyan, shel asara anashim. Ha'im yesh la'anot achreihem amen. Okay, so the question is not is it permissible to say Kaddish without a minyan, but if somebody's saying Kaddish without a minyan, should you answer amen to the Kaddish? Which is really the same question. Which means if the answer is yes to the secondary question, yes, answer amen, that means there's some basis to saying Kaddish without a minyan. Or you might say, you're not allowed to say Kaddish without a minyan. But if somebody said Kaddish, it's not the end of the world that you said amen to his Kaddish. His bottom line, it's a 3.5-page response. But his bottom line is, Aleph, you're not allowed to say Kaddish without a minyan, because it's what's called a davar shebikdusha, just like Baruch Hu and Kedusha and Birkat Kohanim and Kriyat Torah, you have to have a minyan. And let me just add, a minyan begins with 10 men over bar mitzvah. But then the minyan expands to anyone else in shul, man, woman, and child. What does that mean? If you have 11 men in shul, 11 men, right, come to a weekday minyan where perhaps women didn't come. I say perhaps, because in my 6:15 minyan in shul, every morning we have 6 women who come regularly to daven, including my wife who's saying Kaddish this year. But many of these women started as Kaddish sayers and just continued after the year was over. And so we have more than 500,000 of women every morning in shul. Beseder. But most normal shuls, in Shtiblach, there's no zecher of a woman, no zecher, no zachar. No, nothing. So there, if you have 10 men in the minyan, now 11th person falls in. Does that mean you have 10 plus a hitchhiker? I mean, no. Now the minyan is 11. And if you have 20, you have 20. And if you have 100, you have 100. If you have 1,000, 1,000. And the Rav pointed out that the Balei HaTosfot of the opinion that women are part of the minyan after the minyan has been formed. So now if you have 20 men and 10 women, the minyan is 30 people. 30 people. Why is this important? Because if you want to suggest that a woman can say Kaddish in shul, then she has to be part of the minyan. So Rav Henkin, those remember Rav Henkin from the States, Rav Yosef Yehuda Henkin, the grandfather of Rav Henkin from here, who passed away, the husband of Rabbi Henkin from Nishmat. So her husband's grandfather, Rav Yosef Eliyahu Henkin. So he said, yes, a woman can say Kaddish, but for tzniut reasons, there should be at least one man saying Kaddish at the time, simultaneously. Beseder. So that's what's generally practiced. But a woman can say Kaddish. But if you don't accept the notion that a woman is part of the minyan, the tzibur, then she can't say Kaddish from the Ezrat Nashim. So we've accepted the idea that a woman, after the minyan's been formed, that she can say Kaddish. And now the question is, at a Beit Kfarot, not always does the family put together a minyan. So sometimes you have 7, 8 people from the family and friends at an unveiling, and then you look around and see a few other people there. I remember there were professional, Kel Mole zoggers in cemeteries on Sundays, and they'd be very happy, for $20 to join you in the minyan, and they made a business. They made a good catch. on doing this. It was a, and there was a story said about the Rav that he was once at the cemetery for the visit of his wife at his wife's grave, and somebody asked him to come over and say, do you know how to say a kel mole rachma? He says, yeah, I can say a kel mole. So he gave him kel mole, and then the man takes out a $20 bill, and the Rav looks at him and says, I don't take this for money. The man went to the office, and he says, very strange. A rabbi did me a service and didn't take money. Who was that? He says, that was Rabbi Soloveitchik, He's the founder of the Maimonides School here in Boston, in Brookline. The man went and made a $1,000 donation to the yeshiva. That was very nice. Very, very nice. The Rav said, if I would have known that, I'd stay there the whole day. Because he found out about it. So, sure, you want to give $1,000 to yeshiva? I'll say as many kel moles as you want. But Rav Vadia said that you have to have a minyan for saying of Kaddish, and if somebody dares say Kaddish without the minyan at the grave, he says you should not answer Amen. It's what's called the Amen Yitoma. It's an orphaned Amen, and that shouldn't be done. Just like a person blurting out a bracha that's out of context, saying a shahakol nibavro, he's not going to drink, so you don't answer Amen to that kind of a bracha. So this minhag of going to Kivrei Avot before Yamim Noraim is a minhag. For sure it's a minhag. But having said that, the Vilna Gaon, same Vilna Gaon, he was against grave visitations totally, even for parents. After the Levaya, you part, and that's it. You don't go back. And one of his reasons was that Moshe Rabbeinu's gravesite was never ever revealed. Lo Yada Adam never knew where his gravesite was, and that was so that they shouldn't make Moshe Rabbeinu's gravesite into a place of Aliyah Regel, into a, and which unfortunately became very, very, very prominent in the Hasidic world, and in the focus of going to grave visitations to the Rebbe, and it's exactly what the Vilna Gaon was against. He was against that. Why? Because when you go there, you start talking to the tzaddik, and that's perhaps an avera of avodah zarah, doresh el hametim, speaking to the dead. You are allowed to ask a Kadosh Baruch Hu to tap into the extra merits, zchuyot of the tzaddik, that's legitimate. But dare not talk directly to the tzaddik that he should intervene on your behalf. That is a violation of idolatry. You're not allowed to do that. So the Vilna Gaon was against this. And I spoke about this custom of the Vilna Gaon, or anti-custom, when I stood next to the Vilna Gaon's grave in Vilna, and I apologized to the Vilna Gaon. I said, I know you were against this. My dear Rebbe, Rav Hershel Shechter, wrote in his book Nefesh Harav about the Rav that the Rav had the custom not to do grave visitations in accordance with the Vilna Gaon's custom. So I told my Rebbe, Rav Shechter, I said, Rebbe, you know that the Rav went to his wife Kever every single Friday since 1967 until he wasn't able to in the 80s. And I myself took the Rav to the grave of his father, Rav Moshe Soloveitchik, on the yard site in 1975 on Gimel Shvat. So the Rav did go. So Rav Shechter said, apparently after the Rebbitzin died, he changed his custom. So I said, we have to write about that. So Rav Shechter told me, all right, you write about it. So I did in my book on the conversations with the Rav, and Rav Shechter gave me his, rubber stamp on that. Yes, I had to correct the record, because the Rav did go, and he went often enough. And there was almost, that he went so many times. All right. He what? He discouraged other people, but he did. Right. It was not, he himself said it was obsessive. He himself said. The book I wrote is called 70 Conversations in Transit. It's in English. 70 Conversations in Transit with the Rav. Yeah. Okay, Mitzvah Hashem, next week we will continue. I'll try to have another sheet then. Okay.